Who is the goat?
Who is the goat?
So who's the...
Two, one! And ball!
Totally hand.
Now get past me.
Jett! Fillmore! Yeah! Let's go, Violet!
Go, Mom, we're so close. Thank you for...
Say cheese!
Well, for free. It's time to go. You have to go to work, right?
How about you and I, my baby, to see his very first...
What?
It's okay.
What's going on? Come on, let's go.
Who is the goat?
Yeah, thinking that it happened overnight.
A fine time, All-Star.
Girl, you ordered a what?
Night. I hate to say it. Big Bean, the best at rollerball box?
Man, it's pretty much him.
Oh, yeah, that's not good.
No, that's wrong. That was... What? You're not gonna watch the game with us?
Mac Grizz got you.
Ball goes to Harris. It's all alone. Don't question it. He's got time.
One day.
Basketball!
First, never.
Whatever.
Good night, Shirley.
Doors lose by 26.
Okay, fine.
Who's got net? Give me Yes. I can't hear. Get ball. Scott, I thought the cage is where rollerball was. England has the honor of goat. First to three. You're on. Let's go. Now get past.
That dude was guzzling.
Place. Oh, you brought your stuff. Hey.
It's gonna make this one live.
With who?
Oh, we're broken, you know what else?
Get in. Hey, what?
Anonymous animal?
It's Will.
With your note changing out and introduce me.
Drawing the thorns for the back half of the...
Someone give me...
We're so proud of you.
You feel me?
Aside around stressing. And we're gonna act like...
My job to bend the truth, Will. Come on.
You should be elated.
Calm down.
Get down.
Oh, okay.
The atmosphere in Vineland doesn't just vibrate, it roars. This is a territory where the Roarball Court is the ultimate survival grid, a high-velocity landscape where only the fastest and the fiercest claim the crown. Right now, the winning legacy of the Vineland Thorns is entering a state of terminal decline. The scoreboard metrics have shifted toward failure, leaving the legendary Black Panther, Jett Fillmore, to hunt for a miracle in a city that has stopped believing in heroes. But deep within the neon-soaked geometry of the lower districts, a young pygmy goat named Will Harris is recalibrating the logic of the game. While the elite play for the cameras, Will is engineering a revolution on the asphalt training grounds of the slums. He is a high-energy variable with a propulsion force that defies the standard athletic blueprint. When a single sequence of his street-level brilliance is captured and broadcast to the masses, it triggers a kinetic chain reaction that will force the professional world to acknowledge the raw power of the underground. Moving from the pressurized tension of the training facilities to the literal thermal hazards of the Lava Coast Magma Arena, the velocity of this story is set to break every gravitational constraint. This is a high-frequency climb through the ranks of a world that was never built for the small. Witness the calibration of a champion and the birth of a new standard. The game is changing and the roar is just beginning. This is GOAT 2026. A young biological asset identified as young Will Harris stands within the confined architecture of a dimly lit bedroom. He grips a standard issue roarball. The textured surface of the sphere provides a high-friction interface against his small hooves. Young Will stares at a glowing cathode ray tube screen displaying the kinetic vectors of Jett Fillmore. Jett executes a vertical leap that defies standard gravitational constraints. The Black Panther slams the ball through a reinforced hoop, triggering a cascade of digital sparks on the broadcast. Young Will attempts to replicate the motor pattern. He pivots on his left limb and launches the ball toward a makeshift rim constructed from a rusted bicycle wheel. The ball misses the target, rebounding off a stack of old sports magazines and rolling under a wooden bed frame. Young Will retrieves the object. His eyes remain fixed on the flickering image of the Black Panther, moving to the present-day timeline. The camera pans across the urban infrastructure of Vineland. The city is a dense grid of vine-choked concrete and neon-lit geometric shapes. Jett Fillmore enters the Vineland Thorns training facility. She wears a high-compression athletic jersey marked with the numeral 3. Jett moves with a high-velocity gait across the polished hardwood floor. She initiates a series of rapid-fire shooting drills, discharging the roarball with a propulsion force that generates audible wind resistance. Every shot hits the rim and deflects outward. Jett's respiration rate increases as she retrieves a missed rebound. She slams the ball into a vertical support beam. In the observation deck above the court, the warthog known as Florence Flo Everson monitors a holographic display of team metrics. The data stream indicates a prolonged losing streak. Flo taps a glass stylus against a gold-plated tablet. She highlights the missing sixth player slot on the roster. Flo looks down at Jett. The Panther is hunched over, her claws digging into the surface of the roarball. Flo exits the observation deck and walks toward a pressurized elevator. The doors seal with a mechanical hiss. The scene shifts to the interior of Whisker's diner. Adult Will Harris is positioned behind a stainless steel service counter. He utilizes a metal spatula to flip several plant-based patties on a thermal grill. The sizzle of the cooking surface creates a layer of white vapor in the air. Will slides a finished plate toward a group of armadillos seated at the counter. He wipes a smear of grease from his apron and pulls a mobile communication device from his pocket. The screen displays a notification from a banking application. His account balance is insufficient to cover the upcoming apartment rent. Will exits the diner through the rear service door and enters a narrow alleyway. He retrieves a scuffed roarball hidden behind a stack of plastic crates. Will initiates a high-energy dribbling sequence. He maneuvers the ball between discarded oil drums and rusted metal struts. He executes a behind-the-back pass against a brick wall, catching the ball on the rebound without breaking his forward inertia. He eyes a bent metal hoop attached to a fire escape. Will accelerates his velocity. He plants his hooves on the uneven pavement and launches into a soaring layup. The ball travels through the hoop with surgical precision. Will lands in a crouch, his chest heaving as he checks the time on a wall-mounted clock. Will stands before the heavy wooden door of his apartment. Frank the gerbil, the property landlord, is waiting in the hallway. Frank holds a digital tablet displaying an eviction warrant. Will gestures toward the empty rooms and attempts to negotiate. He points to his diner uniform as evidence of employment. Frank shakes a heavy ring of brass keys and points toward the exit. Frank utilizes a physical lockout tool to disable the electronic keypad on the door. Will turns away, his head lowered as he walks toward the stairwell. Moving toward the commercial district, Will enters a shop owned by the vulture known as Sneaky. The interior is a vertical labyrinth of shoeboxes and athletic hardware. Will opens a weathered backpack and removes a pair of pristine, high-traction sneakers. The shoes feature a chromatic purple finish and specialized ankle support architecture. Sneaky utilizes a jeweler's loupe to inspect the stitching and the integrity of the tread. Sneaky nods and slides a thick stack of currency across the glass counter. Will grips the cash tightly. The physical weight of the bills represents his last tactical resource. The environment transitions to the lava coast. The magma arena is a subterranean structure carved from volcanic stone. Heat waves distort the visual field. The floor is a patchwork of basalt plates and glowing orange thermal vents. Main attraction, a massive Andalusian horse, stands at center court. Maine wears a black mesh tank top and gold-plated jewelry that glints under the arena spotlights. Maine spins a premium roarball on the tip of one hoof with effortless calibration. Will walks onto the court, his small frame dwarfed by the massive architecture of the arena. Will tosses his stack of currency onto a stone betting pedestal. Maine looks at the cash and grins, revealing a gold incisor. Maine signals to the referee, a zebra wearing a high-visibility striped vest. The referee blows a chrome whistle to initiate the high-stakes encounter. Will begins the game with a low-altitude crossover. He utilizes his low center of gravity to slip past Maine's right flank. Will executes a quick-release jump shot. The ball clears Maine's outstretched hoof and drops through the net. The scoreboard flashes. Will takes an early 3-point lead. The tactical dynamic shifts. Maine Attraction recalibrates his defensive posture. He utilizes his superior mass to initiate a high-impact screen. His shoulder connects with Will's chest, sending the goat sliding across the basalt floor. Maine retrieves the ball and executes a propulsive drive toward the hoop. He jumps from the free throw line. His massive body eclipses the overhead lights as he slams the ball through the rim. The impact generates a shockwave that rattles the glass backboard. Maine repeats this aggressive maneuver 4 times. The scoreboard metrics quickly favor the horse. In the final sequence of the match, Will attempts a desperate double-clutch layup. Maine anticipates the kinetic vector and swats the ball into the spectator stands. The buzzer sounds, signaling a terminal loss for Will. Maine walks to the pedestal and sweeps the currency into a gym bag. He looks down at Will and scoffs. The horse exits the court, followed by a group of cheering bulls. Will stands alone on the sidewalk. A heavy downpour of rain begins to saturate his fur. He holds a single cardboard box containing a framed photograph of his mother and a small roarball trophy. He looks up at his old apartment window. The lights are off. Will walks through the flooded gutters until he reaches a dilapidated housing unit in the sinking city district. He knocks on a door marked with spray-painted graffiti. Darryl the capybara opens the door. He is wearing a stained bathrobe and holding a handheld gaming console. Hannah the aardwolf appears behind him, clearing a space on a cluttered sofa. Will enters the small room and places his box on the floor. The door closes with a dull thud, sealing the unit as the rain intensifies outside. The biological asset identified as Will Harris rests on a synthetic fabric sofa within the cramped infrastructure of Darryl, the capybara's apartment. Darryl activates a portable computing hardware device. The digital screen displays a low-resolution recording of the Lava Coast encounter. The footage captures Will executing a rapid weight shift maneuver that causes the Andalusian horse, Maine Attraction, to lose his balance. The metadata on the screen indicates a viral transmission rate exceeding 10 million units within a 6-hour window. Hannah the aardwolf points at the metrics on the monitor. Will grips a lukewarm ceramic mug. His internal programming shifts from defeat to recognition of the shifting landscape. Moving to the central command deck of the Vineland Thorns headquarters, the Warthog asset known as Florence Flo Everson monitors a wall of high-definition displays. She utilizes a touch interface to pause the viral video on Will's pivot point. Flo calculates the marketing blueprint of a small-stature athlete. She exits the command deck and boards a luxury ground vehicle with a pressurized cabin. The vehicle navigates the urban grid of the sinking city. Tires display standing water on the asphalt. The ground vehicle halts outside Whisker's Diner. Flo Everson enters the facility, her high-heeled boots creating a rhythmic acoustic signature on the laminate flooring. Will Harris stands behind the service counter. He utilizes a damp cloth to remove organic residue from the surface. Flo places a reinforced briefcase on the counter and activates the locking mechanism. She slides a legal document across the counter toward the goat. Will grips a ballpoint stylus. He applies pressure to the paper. The ink creates a permanent record of his recruitment to the Vineland Thorns. Flo retrieves the document and exits the diner. The bell above the door vibrates as the entrance seals. The perspective shifts to the stadium infrastructure. Will Harris stands at the primary entrance. He carries a single duffel bag containing his remaining assets. He navigates the concrete corridors until he reaches the primary locker room. The architecture is massive. Locker units are scaled for rhinoceros and giraffe anatomy. Jett Fillmore stands at the center of the room. The Black Panther wears a high-compression hoodie. She turns her head and stares at Will. Her pupils dilate as she identifies the new asset. Jett points a claw toward the floor and emits a low-frequency growl. She exits the locker room, her movement a display of high-velocity efficiency. The environment transitions to the media briefing room. A dense cluster of news cameras is mounted on tripods. Will Harris sits behind a long table covered in a green felt cloth marked with the Thorns logo. Jett Fillmore sits to his left. Her body language indicates a high state of internal tension. A proboscis monkey identified as Coach Dennis Cooper stands at a central podium. Flashbulbs discharge in a rapid sequence. The optical load creates white spots in the visual field. A reporter from the back of the room activates a microphone and directs a query toward Jett. Jett leans into her microphone. She grips the edge of the table until the metal frame creaks. She stands up and exits the stage, knocking over a plastic water bottle. Will remains seated. He stares at the bank of cameras as the scene fades to a black frame. Will Harris stands on the primary court of the training facility. Coach Dennis Cooper utilizes a laser pointer to highlight tactical zones on a digital chalkboard. He introduces the biological assets of the Thorns roster. Archie Everhardt, a rhinoceros with massive muscle infrastructure, stands at the post. Lenny Williamson, a giraffe with a 4-meter vertical reach, positions himself near the perimeter. Modo Alashenko, a Komodo dragon with green scales, flickers his tongue. Olivia Burke, the ostrich, executes a high-speed sprint across the hardwood, will nodes at each asset. His hooves create a dull clicking sound on the floor. The training sequence initiates. Coach Cooper discharges a roar ball into the field of play. Jett Fillmore intercepts the sphere and initiates a high-velocity drive. She ignores the passing lanes to Will. She executes a propulsive dunk that rattles the rim. Will moves into a defensive pocket. He anticipates a pass from Archie. Archie launches the ball with high kinetic energy. Will catches the sphere and initiates a crossover maneuver. He passes the ball through the legs of Modo. The lizard asset fails to calibrate his response. The ball bounces out of bounds. Coach Cooper blows a chrome whistle, signaling a failure in the team state logic. The perspective shifts to the game day arena. The internal volume of the stadium is saturated with high-decibel acoustic energy. Will Harris sits on the reinforced plastic bench in the reserve zone. He wears a green warm-up jacket over his jersey. On the court, the Thorns face the Shadows, a team of large-scale gorillas. Jett Fillmore attempts to breach the Shadows' defensive line. A gorilla asset initiates a physical collision. Jett is displaced from her trajectory and falls to the hardwood. The referee signals a technical foul. Jett stands up and initiates a verbal confrontation with the official. The official gestures toward the bench. Jett is ordered to exit the field of play. Coach Cooper points toward Will Harris. Will removes his warm-up jacket and enters the court. He stands in the point guard zone. Archie Everhardt approaches Will and provides a high five. The impact of the rhino's hoof creates a significant shockwave through Will's arm. The referee resumes play. Will grips the roar ball. He identifies a gap in the Shadow's infrastructure. He utilizes his low center of gravity to navigate under the arms of the gorilla defenders. He executes a behind-the-back pass to Lenny. Lenny catches the ball and launches a three-point shot. The ball clears the net. The scoreboard updates the Thorns metric. In the final quarter, the score is equal. Will Harris controls the ball at the top of the key. He looks toward the bench. Jett Fillmore is watching with a focused optical lock. Will signals for a screen. Archie moves his massive bulk to the left, blocking two Shadows defenders. Will utilizes the opening to accelerate his velocity toward the hoop. He launches into a vertical leap. He rotates his body 360 degrees midair. He slams the roar ball through the hoop as the buzzer sounds. The stadium lights flash in a celebratory pattern. Archie Everhardt lifts Will onto his shoulder. The Rhino's twin daughters cheer from the front row. Jett Fillmore stands at the edge of the locker room tunnel. She does not join the celebration. She turns her back and disappears into the shadows of the stadium infrastructure. Will looks toward the teammates who are now surrounding him. The unit cohesion has increased by 40%. The Vineland Thorns roster is positioned within a volumetric haze for a promotional recording. Jett Fillmore occupies the lens axis. She attempts to calibrate a forced smile for the camera hardware. The director triggers a behavioral stimulus. Jett experiences a cognitive load spike and strikes a lighting tripod with her forelimb. The metal structure topples, creating a specular glint on the polished floor as it shatters. Jett exits the soundstage, her kinetic vector directed toward the exterior metro transit. Will Harris follows the Panther asset into the subway infrastructure. His hooves create a metallic rhythm on the station platform. Moving from the pressurized tension of the training facility to the low-light environment of Whisker's Diner, The biological assets transition to a booth blueprint. Will Harris sits opposite Jett. He slides a glass of water toward her. Carol the llama approaches the table. She holds a vintage Rohrball trophy showing significant oxidation. Carol places a hand on Jett's shoulder, delivering a behavioral stimulus centered on Jett's late mother, Louise Harris. Jett's optical distortion increases as she views a framed image of Louise on the wall. Will indicates a photo of a championship ring. The internal programming of the Panther asset begins to stabilize. Jett makes a commitment to Carol to secure the championship hardware. The perspective shifts to a digital livestream interface. Jett Fillmore initiates a mobile broadcast. She defends the Thorns roster against a verbal audit from Main Attraction. Main laughs on the screen, his gold teeth creating a specular glint. Jett terminates the stream and turns to Coach Dennis Cooper. The coach recalibrates the training architecture to include every team asset. The team executes a high-velocity weave drill. Will Harris passes a Rohrball to Lenny Williamson. Lenny utilizes a ballistic trajectory to deposit the ball into the net. This system state continues through a data series of 5 consecutive victories. The win-loss metric moves into the 95th percentile. The team stands at the entrance of the playoff arena. The atmospheric load is high. A volumetric haze of blue and green spotlights sweeps across the crowd. Will Harris checks the tension on his sneaker laces. He prepares for the semi-final diagnostic. The Thorns assets occupy a luxury penthouse infrastructure for a pre-game event. Florence Flo Everson stands within a private office. She utilizes a digital terminal to finalize a financial pipeline involving the sale of the team hardware for personal profit. Will Harris positions himself behind a structural pillar. He performs a forensic audit of the conversation. Flo confirms the termination of all biological contracts following the championship game. Will makes eye contact with Jett Fillmore. Jett signals for silence, creating a terminal error in the team's cognitive trust. Moving to the semi-final stadium, the Thorns initiate play with a fractured logic. Jett Fillmore ignores the tactical blueprint. She hogs the Rohrball and executes high-risk maneuvers that result in 3 turnovers. Will Harris approaches Jett at mid-court. He reveals the forensic data regarding Flo's betrayal to the teammates. Archie Everhardt stops his defensive movement. The team's internal programming collapses. Despite the hardware failure, Jett scores a final second basket to secure a numerical win. The biological assets exit the court and deposit their jerseys in a heap, signaling a mass resignation. Jett Fillmore arrives at the sinking city training yard. She approaches Will Harris. She tearfully admits a fear of legacy obsolescence. Will provides a behavioral stimulus that reunites the roster. The team boards the transport hardware for the final diagnostic at the Lava Coast. The final game against the Magma initiates. Main Attraction utilizes a high-friction defensive strategy. He initiates a physical collision that targets Jett's left hind limb. Jett experiences a catastrophic biological fallout. She is removed from the court on medical hardware. Archie Everhardt responds with a high-impact kinetic vector against Maine. The referee executes an ejection protocol for the Rhino asset. In the final quarter, Jett Fillmore returns to the court utilizing crutch hardware. She passes the Rohrball to Will Harris. Will executes a gravitational-defying leap. The ball enters the net. The Thorns secure the championship trophy. In the post-game locker room, Modo Alashenko displays a winning card sequence. He informs the team that the ownership hardware has been won in a game of chance against Flo. The system state is restored to a permanent victory logic. Moving from the smoldering remains of the Magma Arena to the celebration in Vineland, the Thorns hold the Claw Trophy aloft. The biological assets are secured in their roles. The mission is complete. The creation of this sports comedy, Diagnostic, initiated within the joint venture architecture of Columbia Pictures and SONY Pictures Animation. This production pipeline integrated the high-value resources of Unanimous Media and Modern Magic Productions to engineer a unique animated system state. The development of the narrative blueprint reached a stable configuration in May 2024, although internal data indicates the project logic was in a state of flux as early as 2019. This 5-year development cycle allowed the team to calibrate the specific aesthetic hardware required for the world of Vineland. The primary objective for the studios was the assembly of a high-energy animated sports comedy that could disrupt standard genre metrics. This cinematic system utilizes a calculated runtime to execute its narrative loop, ensuring the delivery of a high-frequency experience for the target demographic. Moving from the studio-level logistics to the directorial hierarchy, Tyree Dillihay occupies the primary seat of power for this project. Dillihay recalibrated the standard sports movie metrics alongside co-director Adam Rosette. Their joint directorial logic prioritizes a street-art aesthetic over traditional rendering pipelines, a decision that fundamentally altered the project's development path. The screenplay engineering was handled by biological assets Aaron Buchsbaum and Teddy Riley. They drafted the narrative hardware to support a story of anthropomorphic aspiration and sports-level conflict. The underlying story architecture was further refined by Nicholas Curcio and Peter Chiarelli, who provided the foundational story beats for the recruitment of Will Harris. This assembly of creative personnel represents a tactical gathering of specialized talent focused on subverting the expectations of animated comedy. The production pipeline was overseen by a group of high-performance assets, led by Stephen Curry and Eric Payton under the Unanimous Media banner. Curry serves a dual-purpose role in this system state, providing both production leadership and acting talent in his film debut. The management of the project's infrastructure was also handled by Michelle Ramo-Couillet, Adam Rosenberg, and Rodney Rothman of Modern Magic. This production team integrated a variety of professional backgrounds to ensure the financial and creative stability of the project. Executive producer logistics were managed by Rick Mischel and Fonda Snyder, while David Schulenberg served as the co-producer for the duration of the animation cycle. This heavy executive architecture suggests a high-stakes investment in the success of the GOAT franchise. Moving to the technical animation pipeline, the physical rendering of the characters and environments was executed by SONY Pictures Imageworks. This facility utilized specialized hardware and software to create the graphic look of the film. The technical team applied animation techniques previously developed for projects like K-pop Demon Hunters and Spider-Man into the Spider-Verse. The resulting system state is a blend of three-dimensional depth and two-dimensional graphic overlays. The design of the impact frames used in rollerball matches was a specific focus for the artists, who integrated graphic sports guard elements to add more visual weight to the characters' kinetic vectors. Every movement of the biological assets was audited to ensure the physics of the world felt consistent with the animal-humanoid hybrid logic of the setting. A significant portion of the production budget was allocated to the design of the team identities and team logos. Graphic designer Emily Morgan was recruited to lead this tactical design phase. Morgan's workflow involved over 500 hours of direct labor, resulting in over 600 rough drafts to reach the final 7-color palette for the league. This high-resolution attention to detail extended to the costumes of the animals, designed by Dominique Dawson. Dawson focused on the specific anatomy and build of the different species, ensuring that the clothing moved naturally with the kinetic force of the athletes. This anatomical audit was critical for maintaining the suspension of disbelief within the rollerball arena. The resulting clothing architecture reflects the personality of each team, from the thermal themes of the magma to the thorn-based patterns of the Vineland thorns. The musical landscape of the project was calibrated by composer Chris Bowers. Bowers engineered a score that utilizes high-frequency hip-hop influences to match the urban atmosphere of Vineland. The soundtrack was officially released via Mercury Records, coinciding with the theatrical release of the film on February 13, 2026. This date was chosen as part of a larger marketing strategy, aligning the film's premiere with the 2026 NBA All-Star Game in Los Angeles. This scheduling decision aimed to maximize the cognitive load of the audience during a peak period of sports interest. The premiere itself was held on February 6, 2026, at a high-profile location in Los Angeles, serving as a diagnostic test for audience response before the global rollout initiated. The biological asset identified as Will Harris is engineered through the vocal hardware of Caleb McLaughlin, moving through the tactical geometry of Whisker's Diner. McLaughlin calibrates the frequency of an aspiring teenage American pygmy goat. The vocal blueprint utilizes a high-resonance tone to reflect the character's internal programming of athletic ambition. This linguistic performance drives the narrative loop, resulting in a relatable baseline for the audience as Will flips plant-based patties on a thermal grill. McLaughlin's verbal velocity increases during high-stress encounters, providing a clear diagnostic of Will's rising cognitive load during the eviction sequence. The primary female asset, Jett Fillmore, utilizes the vocal architecture of Gabrielle Union, positioned within the high-gravity environment of the Thorns training facility. Union provides the deep-frequency authority of an all-star Black Panther. This vocal system state reflects a high-performance athlete facing potential obsolescence. Union's performance utilizes a mix of cold, clinical observations and sharp, rhythmic dismissals during the initial press conference. This vocal calibration creates a friction point with the protagonist, resulting in a stable conflict state that defines the first half of the movie timeline. The linguistic hardware remains consistent even during Jett's biological fallout, maintaining the character's high-status positioning. Supporting the core unit, the rhinoceros asset Archie Everhardt utilizes the vocal infrastructure of David Harbour. Within the locker room geometry, Harbour provides a low-decibel rumble that correlates with the rhino's massive muscle volume. This vocal diagnostic reveals the internal logic of a single-father enforcer, balancing physical displacement force with protective parental instincts. Harbour's vocal performance utilizes a slower rhythmic pace, providing a contrast to the high-frequency chatter of the smaller assets. The resulting acoustic signature adds significant weight to the Thorns' frontline presence during defensive drills. The team's perimeter logic is managed by assets Olivia Burke and Lenny Williamson. Nicola Coughlan provides the linguistic hardware for Olivia, the ostrich asset, utilizing a high-pitched staccato during the promotional video sequence. Stephen Curry makes his film debut as the vocal blueprint for Lenny, the giraffe. Curry calibrates a laid-back acoustic profile that matches the giraffe's vertical height and relaxed kinetic inertia. This casting choice utilizes Curry's real-world athletic authority to ground the Lenny asset within the Rohrbal system state. Their joint vocal interaction during the card game sequence provides a final audit of the team's social cohesion. The antagonist's tactical support involves the vocal logic of Aaron Pierre as main attraction. During the Lava Coast betting sequence, Pierre utilizes a smooth, predatory vocal calibration to establish Maine's psychological dominance. The vocal blueprint uses a high-volume resonance to match the Andalusian horse's physical displacement. This linguistic performance triggers a high-stress response in the protagonist, resulting in the loss of Will's financial hardware. Pierre's vocal frequency remains stable during the final arena collision, emphasizing the horse's unyielding ego state until the terminal error of his defeat. Management and coaching logistics involve the assets Flo Everson and Dennis Cooper. Jennifer Lewis provides the high-authority vocal system for Flo, the warthog owner. Her linguistic profile uses sharp, profit-oriented commands that drive the betrayal subplot. Patton Oswalt calibrates the vocal logic for Coach Cooper, the proboscis monkey. Oswalt utilizes a frantic, tactical rhythm to simulate the cognitive load of a professional coach during the Shadows match. This vocal diversity ensures that every quadrant of the Vineland hierarchy is distinct, resulting in a high-fidelity narrative system that maintains audience engagement throughout the 90-minute runtime. Primary threat state is occupied by the biological asset main attraction. Main enters the tactical geometry of the Lava Coast arena. The Andalusian horse exhibits high-mass physical metrics. His muscle infrastructure is calibrated for maximum displacement. Main utilizes a black mesh tank top as his primary hardware, allowing for high-velocity cooling during intense sports-level friction. The character's visual design utilizes a high Kelvin scale, with gold-plated jewelry reflecting the specular glint of the overhead volcanic spotlights. This aesthetic blueprint establishes Maine as the high-status predator within the Rohrbal ecosystem, causing a direct kinetic challenge to Will Harris. The kinetic vector of main attraction is focused on high-impact verticality. During the initial match against Will, Maine executes a series of slam dunks that generate significant gravitational force. He utilizes his hooves as high-friction landing gear, stabilizing his mass against the basalt floor. Maine's movement logic is engineered for maximum intimidation. Every stride displaces the local atmosphere, resulting in a psychological load that impairs Will's decision-making. Maine's tactical strategy involves a combination of superior height and aggressive physical screening, effectively neutralizing Will's low-altitude crossover maneuvers. Supporting the antagonistic system state is the grizzly bear asset known as Grizz. Grizz occupies the post position for the lava coast magma, his vocal hardware provided by Jelly Roll. During a semi-final diagnostic, Grizz initiates a physical collision with Archie Everhardt. The Grizzly utilizes a massive displacement force to relocate Archie from the defensive lane. This interaction establishes the magma as a high-friction organization that prioritizes biological fallout over clean sports logic. Grizz serves as the physical enforcer for Maine's ego state, creating a dual-layer threat that the Thorns must audit and overcome. Main Attraction's viral footprint is documented through the digital livestream interface. The horse asset utilizes a high-frequency mobile broadcast to perform a psychological audit of the Vineland Thorns. Maine stares into the camera hardware. His pupils exhibit an optical distortion caused by his own arrogance. He utilizes a verbal stimulus to mock the face of the Thorns, Jett Fillmore. This live-stream event triggers a cognitive response in Jett, leading to the recruitment of Coach Cooper for a total system recalibration. Maine's digital presence acts as a catalyst for the team's eventual unification, despite his intention to fracture their logic. The final collision at the Magma Arena initiates. Main Attraction utilizes a career-ending kinetic vector targeting Jett Fillmore's left hind limb. He initiates a calculated trip maneuver using his rear hoof as a lever system. The resulting biological fallout forces Jett into a crutch-based mobility state. Maine celebrates this fracture in the opponent's infrastructure, demonstrating a terminal error in his sportsmanship logic. This aggressive behavior triggers an ejection protocol for Archie Everhardt, who initiates a high-impact tackle against the horse. The arena's thermal load increases as the match enters its final quadrant, with Maine attempting to maintain his lead against a resilient Thorns roster. Maine's system state reaches a point of total failure, as Will Harris executes the winning shot. A stray thermal spark from a floor vent connects with Maine's hair hardware. The resulting combustion creates a localized thermal hazard, burning away Maine's mane and leaving him in a state of aesthetic ruin. Maine stands in the center of the court. His status metrics have reached 0. He is a biological asset without a legacy. The crowd's cognitive load shifts from fear to mockery as the horse is removed from the field. This forensic audit confirms that Main Attraction's unyielding ego was the primary cause of his structural collapse, ending his tenure as the league MVP. The financial diagnostic of this project initiates with a total global gross of $192 million. Looking at the opening sequence, the low-budget environment of Will's bedroom serves as a contrast to the high-capital success of the film's release. The domestic market in the United States and Canada provided a hardware contribution of $103 million. International territories generated a supplementary $89 million, confirming a stable global distribution pipeline. This revenue system indicates that the animal hybrid sports logic reached a high-frequency saturation point within the primary demographic. Moving through the fiscal timeline to the opening weekend metrics, the film generated a $35 million domestic debut. The simulation shows Will Harris losing his financial assets at the Lava Coast, while the film's actual market trajectory was achieving a second-place ranking behind Wuthering Heights. This opening cycle represents the highest numerical success for an original animated system state since the release of Elemental in 2023. The production team monitored these data points to calibrate the long-term viability of the franchise architecture. The initial inertia of the box office performance provided a stable platform for the subsequent rollout phases. The second weekend diagnostic shows a shift in the hierarchy. While the Thorns initiate their winning streak on screen, the film's financial system reached the #1 position in the market. A revenue of $17.2 million was recorded, effectively dethroning Wuthering Heights from its status position. This 17% drop rate indicates high audience retention and positive word-of-mouth behavioral stimulus. The internal logic of the box office trajectory suggests that the hip-hop vibe and urban aesthetic resonated with the urban grid consumers, maintaining a high-velocity capital flow throughout the mid-game cycle. In the final quadrant of the theatrical run, represented by the championship sequence, the film recorded a $12 million third weekend gross. This metric placed the project in the second-place slot, facing a competitive threat state from the release of Scream 7. Despite this external pressure, The total revenue pipeline reached the $192 million terminal state. The forensic audit of the box office confirms a successful conversion of production capital into global profit, as the Thorns celebrate their victory on the court. The studio executives finalize the financial record of a blockbuster system state. The critical reception diagnostic initiates with an 84% positive rating on the Rotten Tomatoes terminal. This data stream is derived from 88 professional audits, resulting in a consensus that praises the nifty animation and the solid moral blueprint. Viewing the training sequences, the critics identify a familiar redemption hardware within the script architecture. However, the stylistic finesse of the SONY Pictures Imageworks pipeline provided a necessary aesthetic stimulus to maintain high engagement levels. The cinema score audit returned a grade of A, indicating that the general biological audience perceived the film as a high-value experience. The Metacritic system state provides a more clinical perspective, recording a weighted average of 60 out of 100 based on 16 critics. This metric suggests a mixed but stable reception logic. During the promotional video sequence, the critical divided opinion becomes evident. Assets like Mark Kennedy from the Associated Press performed a forensic deconstruction of the writing, labeling the narrative arc as lazy and tiresome. Conversely, Eric Goldman from IGN calibrated his review toward the animation quality, noting that the character designs effectively utilized the biological traits of the animals to create a unique behavioral system. Specific qualitative audits from the industry elite provide additional insight into the film's system state. Brandon Yu of the New York Times documented a story with few surprises, yet enlivened by colorful texture and a dynamic kinetic style. Looking at the semi-final sequence, the critical audit highlights the enlivening effect of the artwork over the rudimentary emotional concepts. John Nugent of Empire provided a lower status rating of 2 out of 5, classifying the film as a rare miss for SONY Pictures animation. This negative data point suggests that the high-frequency hip-hop vibe did not provide a sufficient stimulus for every sector of the critical landscape. The final diagnostic from Owen Glaberman of Variety provides a counter-narrative, calling the project a vibrant surprise and an off-kilter sports fable. As the final victory occurs, the critical consensus remains generally favorable toward the visual engineering. This forensic audit of the reviews confirms that while the story infrastructure followed a traditional blueprint, the technical execution and voice cast provided a high-fidelity experience that justified its existence in the 2026 market. The resulting data stream confirms a successful mission for the production team, securing both financial profit and cultural status. The technical infrastructure of SONY Pictures Imageworks functions as the central processing unit for this animated system state, operating within a blueprint previously utilized for Spider-Verse. The engineering team performed a forensic recalibration of their rendering pipeline to support the high-velocity requirements of Rohrbal. This system state prioritizes a 2D-3D hybrid logic, where three-dimensional models are overlaid with hand-drawn line work and graphic ink splatter metrics. This architecture creates a stable interface between traditional computer-generated depth and the flat aesthetic of street art graffiti. Mapping the visual feed, the bedroom environment of Will Harris demonstrates this calibration. The furniture geometry maintains rigid 3D proportions, while the light leak artifacts and hatching patterns on the walls are applied as separate graphic layers, resulting in a textured atmosphere that rejects the standard clean render aesthetic of competing studios. Moving into the high-friction action sequences, the kinetic vector of the biological assets is defined by a variable frame rate logic. The software architecture allows for the animation of characters on 2s or on 3s, meaning the character's physical displacement occurs every second or third frame while the camera's optical axis moves on 1s. This calibration generates a stuttered, high-inertia movement style that mimics the feel of traditional stop-motion or hand-drawn ink media. During the Lava Coast bedding sequence, main attractions trot across the basalt floor displays this frame rate diagnostic. His muscular mass moves with a rhythmic delay, creating a cognitive load for the viewer that emphasizes the weight and propulsive force of the Andalusian horse asset. The rendering pipeline must handle these staggered metrics without causing a terminal error in the visual cohesion. a feat achieved through a proprietary software pipeline designed specifically for this project's structural needs. The physics engine used for the rollerball matches utilizes a non-Newtonian logic to emphasize the dramatic system state. Kinetic vectors are often exaggerated, with characters remaining in a state of gravitational suspension longer than biological reality allows. Will Harris launches into a vertical leap that displays this calibration. The software calculates his upward velocity as a high-frequency climb, before freezing his inertia at the apex of the jump to allow for the insertion of impact frames. These impact frames are high-density graphic assets, often featuring simplified color palettes and bold, radial line work. This optical distortion serves as a behavioral stimulus for the audience, signaling a high-impact event before the character's descent initiates. The displacement of the ball itself follows a similar trajectory logic, with speed lines, or motion smears, applied to the sphere's geometry to visualize its propulsive force through the volumetric haze of the arena. Optical calibration within the Imageworks pipeline also focuses on the Kelvin scale and chromatic saturation levels. The lighting architecture does not mimic natural solar behavior, but instead follows a logic of high-contrast theatrical illumination. In the Vineland-Thorne's locker room, the volumetric haze is backlit by teal and magenta light sources. This creates a specular glint on the scales of Modo Alashenko and the thick fur of Archie Everhardt. The depth of field is managed through a digital focal length that mimics anamorphic lenses, resulting in a characteristic horizontal lens flare and oval-shaped bokeh in the background geometry. This optical infrastructure is designed to keep the focus on the biological assets, while the background remains a blur of chromatic saturation, ensuring that the high-density information of the foreground is not lost to the viewer's cognitive processing. A critical diagnostic of the pipeline is the incline system, which acts as a structural blueprint for every character. These lines are not fixed to the 3D geometry, but are instead generated based on the camera's perspective and the character's movement velocity. During Jett Fillmore's low-light subway transit, the lines on her face shift and dissipate to simulate the movement of shadows. This system requires a high-performance compute load, as the software must audit the position of every line against the character's anatomy in real time. The result is a biological asset that feels sketched into the environment, maintaining the street art logic of the Vineland world. This line work also serves as a forensic tool to emphasize muscle tension and emotional states, with thicker lines appearing during high-stress maneuvers and thinner lines during states of rest. The terminal state of the animation pipeline is reached during the final rendering pass, where the volumetric haze and particle effects are integrated into the primary architecture. During the championship victory, the confetti and thermal sparks are calculated as individual kinetic assets with their own friction and inertia metrics. The SONY Imageworks team utilized a cloud-based rendering infrastructure to handle the massive data stream required for these high-density scenes. Every frame undergoes a final quality audit to ensure that the chromatic saturation levels match the 7-color palette established in the early development phase. This forensic deconstruction of the pipeline confirms that the project's visual success is the result of a highly calibrated technical system designed to push the boundaries of animated sports media. The aesthetic blueprint of Vineland utilizes a street art logic to define its tactical geometry. Moving through the urban infrastructure, the environment is a high-density collection of vine-choked concrete and graphic-layered surfaces. Directorial logic demanded an environment that felt lived in and handmade, rejecting the polished surfaces of typical animated cityscapes. Every wall and structural pillar in the sinking city functions as a canvas for graffiti assets, ranging from simple tags to high-fidelity murals of past rollerball legends. This volumetric haze of color and line work creates a unique system state, where the city itself feels like a biological entity in a state of constant evolution. The chromatic saturation of the environment is calibrated to a specific high-contrast range, ensuring that the tactical geometry of the streets remains visually distinct from the characters. Volumetric haze and optical distortion are utilized to create a sense of environmental depth within the flat graffiti aesthetic. During the promotional video sequence, the set is saturated with a blue atmospheric load. This haze interacts with the chromatic saturation of the characters, softening the edges of the line work and creating a specular glint on the gear. The lens axis of the virtual camera is often tilted, creating an off-kilter perspective that matches the hip-hop vibe described in the critical response data. This optical calibration is a deliberate choice to subvert the standard clean look of animation, forcing the viewer to engage with the environment as a textured, physical space. The use of chromatic aberration on the edges of the screen further emphasizes this lens-based logic, simulating the imperfections of a physical camera. Tactical geometry in the magma arena follows a different set of aesthetic rules. The infrastructure is carved from basalt plates, with glowing orange thermal vents providing the primary light source. During Flo's secret sale meeting, the geometry of the office utilizes long, sharp angles and a high-contrast shadow logic. This aesthetic choice emphasizes the predatory nature of the character's internal programming. The contrast between the warm volcanic light of the arena and the cold, clinical blue of Flo's office creates a visual friction that mirrors the narrative conflict. The architecture in these scenes is more rigid and imposing, representing the corporate side of the Rohrbal system state compared to the street logic of the sinking city. The terminal verdict of the aesthetic audit confirms that the project's visual identity is a high-fidelity integration of street art culture and professional sports branding. As the Thorns celebrate with the Claw Trophy, the graffiti geometry of the background is a blur of celebratory colors and graphic explosions. The specular glint of the trophy hardware reflects the entire 7-color palette, serving as a final diagnostic of the film's artistic success. This aesthetic system state is a rare miss from traditional animation norms, providing a unique visual language that prioritizes texture and personality over numerical rendering perfection. The world of GOAT is a calibrated, high-frequency experience that successfully bridges the gap between the basketball court and the graffiti-covered alleyway. The technical blueprint for character costuming in this project requires a forensic audit of biological anatomy versus athletic hardware. Costume designer Dominique Dawson engineered the wardrobe pipeline to accommodate the massive structural variation between the different animal species in Vineland. Moving to the initial recruitment diagnostic, the system state shows Will Harris in a standard-issue diner uniform. The fabric simulation calculates the friction between the synthetic fibers and the coarse fur of the American pygmy goat asset. The internal programming of the wardrobe software allows for high-velocity movement without causing a clipping error in the rendering logic. Every seam is calibrated to the specific skeletal architecture of the goat, ensuring that the propulsive force of Will's dribbling maneuvers does not result in a mechanical failure of the clothing geometry. The result is a high-fidelity visual experience where the clothing feels integrated into the asset's physical displacement. Transitioning to the high-mass metrics of Archie Everhardt, the wardrobe hardware reaches a level of extreme engineering. Designing a jersey for an Indian rhinoceros requires a massive increase in virtual fabric surface area. Dawson utilized a high-tensile mesh blueprint for the Thorns team uniforms, allowing for the expansion and contraction of Archie's muscle infrastructure during high-friction defensive plays. The numeral 34 is applied as a heavy graphic layer that maintains its geometry even when the Rhino asset initiates a high-impact screen. The weight of the fabric is simulated with a high inertia metric, resulting in realistic folds and creases that react to the gravitational constraint of the character's movement. This anatomical calibration ensures that the largest biological asset on the court remains a cohesive part of the team's visual identity without sacrificing physical realism. The vertical logic of Lenny Williamson provides a unique challenge for the focal length of the wardrobe camera. During the promotional soundstage diagnostic, the giraffe asset wears a specialized long-axis jersey. The clothing must navigate the unique curvature of the giraffe's neck while maintaining a stable center of gravity. The software architecture utilizes a series of anchor points along the spine to ensure the jersey doesn't experience unwanted displacement during Lenny's vertical leaps. This wardrobe system state is further complicated by the giraffe's 4-meter height, requiring the rendering pipeline to audit the texture resolution over a much larger surface area than the smaller assets. The resulting visual data stream provides a crisp, high-resolution image of the fabric weave even at extreme distances, maintaining the forensic quality of the animation across every scale of the biological roster. Jett Fillmore occupies the primary athletic gear quadrant with a high-compression compression suit blueprint. Viewing the training sequence, the Black Panther's jersey is calibrated for high-velocity cooling and aerodynamic efficiency. The fabric utilizes a chromatic saturation of deep greens and blacks, matching the predator status of the asset. The tight-fit geometry allows the audience to perform a forensic audit of Jett's muscle contractions and skeletal pivots during her vertical drives. This wardrobe logic reinforces the face of the thorn's status position, providing a visual stimulus that signals professional dominance. The specular glint on the Under Armour branding hardware adds an additional layer of corporate status, linking the biological asset to the commercial infrastructure of the Rollerball League. This integration of real-world branding into the anatomical wardrobe architecture increases the cognitive load of the setting's authenticity. The footwear hardware represents a critical intersection of physics and fashion within the project's logic. Mapping the shoe shop sequence, the sneakers are presented as high-precision tactical tools rather than simple aesthetic choices. The sneaker architecture features a high-traction tread pattern designed to manage the high-friction basalt floor of the lava coast. Every shoe model is audited for its specific biological asset, from the reinforced hoof guards of main attraction to the lightweight, propulsive soles used by Will Harris. The chromatic saturation of the purple shoes sold by Sneaky the Vulture provides a strong visual contrast against the muted tones of the sinking city. This footwear system state drives the narrative inertia, as the loss of Will's sneakers represents a terminal error in his athletic capability, forcing a recalibration of his professional path. Corporate status wardrobe metrics are managed through the asset Florence Flo Everson. Flo occupies the command deck in a tailored business suit designed for high-authority biological signaling. The suit's architecture uses sharp angles and rigid structural pads to emphasize the Warthog's dominance over the roster hardware. This status signaling wardrobe provides a psychological load that triggers compliance in the other biological assets. The texture simulation for Flo's clothing utilizes high-value materials like silk and fine wool, contrasting with the utilitarian mesh of the players. This visual diagnostic clearly defines the hierarchy within the Vineland organization, placing Flo at the apex of the fiscal and administrative pipeline. The final forensic audit of the wardrobe concludes that the anatomical calibration of the clothing is a primary driver of character identity, bridging the gap between the sports arena and the corporate boardroom. Forensic deconstruction of the antagonist asset initiates with a mass displacement audit of main attraction. Standing within the volcanic geometry of the lava coast, the Andalusian horse represents a high inertia variable that disrupts the standard flow of Rollerball. Maine's physical mass is estimated at 500 kilograms, requiring a massive propulsion force to initiate movement from a resting state. The physics engine calculates his kinetic vector as a heavy, ground-pounding sequence that generates a significant acoustic signature within the arena. This mass logic means that once Maine achieves high velocity, his forward inertia is nearly impossible to neutralize for smaller biological assets like Will Harris. This physical dominance creates a constant threat state, forcing the protagonist to recalibrate his tactical approach around the horse's superior displacement metrics. Contact metrics during the semi-final encounter reveal Maine's aggressive collision logic. The horse asset initiates a targeted kinetic vector against Jett Fillmore, utilizing his rear hoof as a lever system to displace her left hind limb. The physics engine calculates the force of this impact as a high-energy transfer that exceeds the biological limits of the Panther's bone infrastructure. The resulting fracture is a forensic terminal error, forcing Jett into a state of total system failure. Maine's celebration of this biological fallout confirms his role as a high-friction antagonist who prioritizes the destruction of the opponent over the acquisition of points. This collision diagnostic triggers a psychological response in the Vineland Thorns, shifting their internal programming from fear to focused retaliation. The terminal verdict of Maine's physics diagnostic occurs involving a catastrophic combustion vector, as Will Harris executes the final championship dunk. A stray thermal spark from the floor vents connects with the volatile hair hardware on Maine's head. The resulting thermal load triggers a rapid-fire chemical reaction, burning away the horse's mane in a high-frequency flash. This combustion represents the total system state collapse of the character, as his primary aesthetic status marker is destroyed. Maine stands in the center of the court, his displacement force reduced to zero. The forensic audit confirms that Maine's unyielding kinetic inertia was ultimately redirected by the Thorn's superior unit cohesion, resulting in the permanent termination of his MVP metrics. The game's logic is restored to a state of balance as the high-mass threat is neutralized. The Kelvin calibration of this animated system state serves as a high-fidelity diagnostic tool, defining the territorial boundaries and the emotional infrastructure of Vineland. Graphic designer Emily Morgan engineered a chromatic blueprint that limits the visual hardware to a specific 7-color palette, rejecting the standard infinite color logic of traditional animation. This calibration functions as a behavioral stimulus, guiding the viewer's cognitive load through a series of high-saturation environments. Mapping the visual feed, the bedroom of young Will Harris is calibrated to a low-Kelvin warm amber, simulating the nostalgia state of the asset's early internal programming. The light leak artifacts visible on the wall surfaces are not accidental, but are instead calculated graphic overlays designed to increase the perceived texture of the memory. This initial light state establishes a baseline for the protagonist before the narrative loop transitions into the high-frequency urban grid of the present day. Moving from the warm baseline of the past to the cold, clinical infrastructure of the Vineland urban grid, the Kelvin scale shifts dramatically toward the blue end of the spectrum. The sinking city is defined by a high-frequency mix of teal and magenta neon lighting, creating an atmospheric load of constant activity and urban friction. This chromatic saturation is a deliberate choice to link the biological assets to the street art aesthetic of the set's tactical geometry. Analyze the volumetric haze in the alleyway where Will practices. It is saturated with a cool cyan hue that emphasizes the specular glint on the discarded metal barrels. This lighting architecture ensures that even the lowest status territories of the city possess a vibrant, graphic energy that distinguishes the project from the muted tones of traditional sports comedy diagnostics. The rendering pipeline audits the interaction between these neon sources and the fur hardware of the characters, resulting in a rim lighting effect that maintains character silhouette integrity against the dense background geometry. The thermal load of the Lava Coast magma arena requires a total system recalibration of the lighting hardware. The environment transitions to a high Kelvin thermal signature, dominated by intense oranges, searing reds, and deep basalt purples. This color state is not just an aesthetic layer, but a forensic representation of the arena's volcanic proximity. The light source is positioned below the lens axis, originating from the glowing lava vents in the floor architecture. This underlighting creates an optical distortion that increases the predatory status signaling of main attraction and the magma roster. Specular glint on Maine's gold jewelry is calibrated to reflect these high thermal sources, resulting in a visual frequency that signals high-mass threat and aggression. The atmospheric load in this quadrant is thick with orange-tinted volumetric haze, simulating the presence of airborne ash and sulfur-based chemical outputs, which further impairs the optical clarity of the visiting Thorn's roster. Analyzing the tactical geometry of the Thorn's training facility, the lighting logic returns to a state of professional athletic calibration. The Kelvin scale is neutralized toward a daylight-balanced hardware setting, though the shadows remain saturated with the team's primary green and red palette. This chromatic consistency acts as a structural blueprint for the team's identity, reinforcing their presence within the frame. Every Rohrball court in the film utilizes a specific light state to define its competitive logic. The Shadows Arena utilizes a high-contrast shadow logic, where the gorillas are nearly invisible until they enter the primary light cone. This use of negative lighting increases the cognitive load on the audience, forcing a higher level of synaptic focus to track the kinetic vectors of the athletes during the high-velocity match. The rendering engine must audit these rapid transitions between light and dark to prevent a terminal error in visual continuity. The diner bonding sequence initiates a pivot toward a high-saturation, warm-textured environment. The lighting in Whisker's Diner is calibrated to a golden hour frequency, utilizing a high volume of lens flare artifacts and volumetric haze to simulate a state of emotional vulnerability. This light state serves as a behavioral stimulus for Jett Fillmore, assisting in the recalibration of her internal programming toward team unit cohesion. The chromatic saturation of the Llama asset Carol is enhanced by this warm light, making her feel like a stable, high-value resource within Will's support network. Analyze the framed photograph of Louise Harris on the wall, It is illuminated by a single, focused spotlight that creates a specular glint on the glass hardware. This lighting choice guides the protagonist's optical axis toward the core narrative driver, linking the championship goal to the memory state of his mother. Moving to the corporate command deck, the Kelvin scale is pushed to its cold terminal state. Flo Everson's office is a sterile blueprint of blue and gray saturation, rejecting the vibrant palette of the Roarball arena. This lighting architecture signals the terminal error of the character's loyalty, placing her within a clinical, profit-oriented logic that stands in opposition to the high-energy warmth of the Thorns roster. The sharp angles of the office geometry are emphasized by a high contrast, low-diffusion light source, creating hard shadows that mimic the predatory nature of the Warthog asset. This forensic use of color effectively isolates Flo from the rest of the narrative world, indicating that her internal programming is no longer synced to the success of the biological assets on the court. The resulting visual friction prepares the audience for the eventual betrayal sequence. The Terminal Victory diagnostic integrates the entire 7-color palette into a final, high-frequency explosion of chromatic data. As Will Harris executes the winning dunk, the arena lighting hardware switches to a rapid-fire celebratory cycle. Teal, magenta, green, and orange light beams sweep across the tactical geometry of the court, creating a volumetric haze of pure color. This chromatic saturation is a final stimulus that signals the successful completion of the narrative loop. The specular glint on the claw trophy hardware is calculated to reflect every color in the palette simultaneously, acting as a forensic summary of the entire film's aesthetic journey. The resulting image is a high-fidelity, high-energy state that marks the permanent win state for the Vineland Thorns. This terminal verdict of the Kelvin calibration confirms that the color logic was a primary component in the project's technical and emotional success. The physical roster audit for the Vineland Thorns identifies the biological asset Archie Everhardt as the primary unit for mass displacement and tactical enforcer logistics. Positioned within the locker room architecture, Archie exhibits a high-density characteristic of the Indian rhinoceros species, engineered to sustain a high friction coefficient during sports-level contact. His skeletal infrastructure is a data point of extreme load-bearing capability, supporting a muscle mass that generates a massive kinetic vector during defensive screens. This rhinoceros asset functions as the anchor point for the roster's defensive logic. Every stride across the court hardware produces a significant acoustic resonance, indicating a high mass displacement that forces a vector shift in any opposing asset attempting to breach the paint. The forensic deconstruction of his movement pattern reveals a low-frequency rumble in his respiration, calibrated to maintain a steady system state under a high cognitive load. Moving to the training facility roster diagnostic, Archie's role as the tactical enforcer is further analyzed through his interaction with the roster hardware. During the practice sequence block, the Rhino asset utilizes his cranial horn as a peripheral tool for ball trajectory manipulation and physical intimidation. The friction coefficient between his massive hooves and the floor hardware is monitored via the spectral range, revealing a stable torque output during rapid pivot maneuvers. While his velocity peak is lower than the feline assets, his momentum remains a nearly unstoppable variable once a straight-line trajectory is initiated. This physical profile makes Archie a critical parameter in protecting smaller assets like Will Harris from the high-thermal aggressive logic of teams like the Magma. The roster logic assumes that Archie will serve as a physical buffer, absorbing collision force to allow the high-frequency scorers to operate without interference. Biological fatherhood serves as a secondary behavioral stimulus that recalibrates Archie's internal programming. Spatial transitions to the spectator stands reveal the dual-unit assets, Addie and Ari. These twin Rhino offspring represent a high-value personal node within Archie's life logic. This parental submetric provides a unique contrast ratio to his role as a massive enforcer. The forensic audit of his behavior shows a synaptic response shift when the twins are within his optical axis, transitioning from an aggressive enforcer state to a protective parental state. This internal programming is a key data point in Archie's loyalty to the Vineland territory. His motivation to maintain a stable roster position is linked directly to the financial pipeline required to support his offspring in the sinking city infrastructure. This behavioral stimulus ensures that Archie's asset value remains high, even when the organization faces a terminal error in management. Physical collision metrics reach a luminance peak during the Shadows match. Moving through the tactical geometry of the court, Archie initiates a high-impact block against a gorilla asset. The forensic deconstruction of this collision shows a massive transfer of kinetic energy, resulting in the total displacement of the opposing biological unit. This enforcer logic is not merely about defensive point acquisition, but involves the management of the opponent's cognitive load through physical dominance. Archie's presence on the court acts as a constant behavioral stimulus, forcing the opposition to adjust their ballistic trajectory to avoid his zone of control. The contrast ratio between Archie's gray hide and the chromatic saturation of the Thorn's jersey emphasizes his status as the structural wall of the organization. The final diagnostic of Archie's enforcer state occurs during the championship sequence block, when main attraction initiates a terminal error targeted at Jett Fillmore's limb hardware. Archie's internal programming shifts toward maximum retaliation. He abandons the standard roarball logic to execute a high-momentum tackle against the horse asset. The forensic audit of this sequence reveals a total vector shift from athlete to protector. This tactical decision results in an ejection protocol, a mission parameter failure that Archie accepts to ensure the safety of his teammates. Moving from the court to the bench infrastructure, Archie monitors the final quadrant with a high synaptic load, his twins watching from the front row nodes. Spatial transition to the post-game hardware win concludes the audit. Archie Everhardt is seen holding his daughters while the confetti hardware falls through the volumetric haze. The terminal verdict of this asset audit confirms that Archie is the structural glue of the roster, balancing extreme physical mass displacement with a high-fidelity emotional core. His role as the father enforcer provides the necessary structural support for the team to achieve its final victory state. The luminance of the championship trophy reflects in his optical hardware, marking a successful completion of the mission parameters. The psychological forensic deconstruction of the biological asset Jett Fillmore initiates with an audit of her legacy logic. Positioned as the face of the Thorns within the Vineland infrastructure, Jett operates under a high cognitive load regarding the potential for athletic obsolescence. Mapping her behavioral stimulus, the Black Panther asset displays a high-frequency internal friction. She views herself as the primary hardware of the organization, a data point that is threatened by the introduction of new assets like Will Harris. Jett's initial neural pattern is defensive and exclusionary, manifesting as a dismissal of Will's recruitment diagnostic. This behavioral state is a defense mechanism against a terminal error in her professional status position. Her internal programming is hard-coded to prioritize personal legacy over unit cohesion, leading to a fractured roster logic during the early match cycles. Moving to the press conference interface, Jett's social parameters are put under a high-intensity luminance. The optical load from the camera hardware triggers a high-stress synaptic response. Jett's refusal to engage with the media data stream is a forensic marker of her internal instability. She perceives the viral trajectory of Will Harris as a direct threat vector to her own chromatic saturation in the public eye. Her physical displacement from the stage is a non-verbal audit of her refusal to accept a shared status position. This sequence block establishes the primary psychological conflict grid, where Jett must either recalibrate her internal programming or face a permanent failure in her professional mission parameters. A logical pivot occurs within the diner infrastructure. Spatial transitions to the booth geometry show Jett in a state of lower cognitive load. The behavioral stimulus provided by Carol the llama, centered on the memory of Louise Harris, triggers a total system reset for the Panther asset. Jett's optical hardware exhibits a refraction of emotional data as she views the legacy trophy hardware of her mother. This data point bridges the gap between her personal ambition and the community logic of Vineland. The forensic audit of this interaction reveals a vector shift in Jett's motivation, moving from an egocentric legacy state to a team-centric mission parameter. She makes a vow to secure the Claw Trophy, a commitment that recalibrates her neural pattern toward unit integration. Analyzing the training yard sequence block, Jett's internal logic is tested by the viral mockery of main attraction. The horse asset's verbal stimulus targets Jett's fear of failure, acting as a forensic probe into her psychological weakness, instead of a terminal error. This stimulus results in an increased torque in her training efforts. Moving from the digital interface to the physical training grid, Jett initiates a high-velocity collaboration with Coach Cooper and the Thorns roster. She begins to audit the kinetic vectors of her teammates, recognizing their asset value as essential components of the win state. This recalibration is visualized through a series of high-frequency passing drills, where Jett's previously isolated motor patterns are now integrated into a cohesive team system. The betrayal audit during the semi-final sequence reveals a temporary relapse into her old neural patterns. Upon learning of Flo Everson's secret pipeline to sell the roster, Jett experiences a cognitive load spike that impairs her tactical decision-making. She attempts to solo carry the Roarball hardware, reverting to a hog logic that fractures the team's unit cohesion. This behavioral stimulus response confirms that her fear of obsolescence is still a volatile parameter. However, the biological fallout of the team's mass resignation forces a final forensic realization. Jett acknowledges that her legacy is not a static data point, but a living system state that requires the support of the collective unit. She approaches Will Harris in the rain-saturated alleyway, a spatial diagnostic of her vulnerability and her need for a system restart. The final mission parameter completion occurs during the championship match. Even after sustaining catastrophic limb hardware damage, Jett's internal logic remains focused on the win state. She utilizes her remaining mobility metrics to execute a final, high-fidelity pass to Will Harris. The forensic audit of this sequence block shows a total ego dissolution, as she prioritizes the team's ballistic trajectory over her own scoring record. Her reaction time to Will's winning dunk is a state of pure synaptic joy, signaling a permanent win for her character arc. As the luminance of the arena celebrates the victory, Jett stands as a biological asset that has successfully navigated the transition from isolated idol to integrated leader. The terminal verdict of her behavioral audit confirms that her greatest legacy was the recalibration of her own soul hardware for the benefit of the roster. The tactical geometry of the Lava Coast Magma Arena represents the most aggressive environmental hardware within the Vineland Roarball League. Moving from the atmospheric moisture of the sinking city to the high-Kelvin volcanic infrastructure, the forensic diagnostic reveals a territory engineered for maximum biological stress. The primary floor blueprint consists of hexagonal basalt plates, calibrated with a high friction coefficient to support the high mass displacement of assets like main attraction. Between these structural plates, active cooling lava channels generate a constant thermal load, reaching temperatures that exceed the standard metabolic safety parameters for mammalian assets. This heat state causes a permanent state of refraction in the air, leading to optical distortion that impairs long-range optical hardware during ballistic trajectory calculations. The rendering cycle utilizes a high volume of orange-tinted volumetric haze to visualize this atmospheric load, creating a visual system state where the arena itself acts as a persistent behavioral stimulus for the players. Analyzing the spectral range of the arena, the luminance is dominated by low-frequency infrared signatures originating from the floor grid. This lighting logic forces the biological assets into a state of high cognitive load, as their internal programming must compensate for the lack of overhead daylight-balanced photons. The specific Kelvin scale utilized here sits between 1,000 and 2,000 units, emphasizing the specular glint on the sweat hardware of the players. Forensic deconstruction of the basalt plates shows a variable friction coefficient based on the proximity to the lava nodes. Plates located directly above the thermal pipeline exhibit lower traction metrics due to the expansion of the material, leading to potential torque failure during rapid pivot maneuvers. Opposing rosters, such as the Vineland Thorns, must perform a real-time audit of the floor geometry to avoid these low traction zones, while the Magma roster utilizes their home turf hardware knowledge to maintain a velocity peak. The acoustic signature of the arena provides a further data point for the forensic audit. The roar of the volcanic vents creates a low-decibel rumble that saturates the spectral range, functioning as a high-volume behavioral stimulus that can disrupt teammate unit communication. During the high-stakes match, the Musk Ox and Fruit Bat commentary units must increase their vocal hardware output to penetrate the atmospheric load. The sound engineering pipeline utilizes a heavy bass profile to match the physical weight of the volcanic environment. This acoustic infrastructure increases the synaptic response time of the athletes, as the constant noise creates a state of sensory saturation. For the protagonist, Will Harris, this environment serves as a trial-by-fire diagnostic, testing whether his low-mass kinetic vector can survive in a high-thermal tactical grid. The resulting visual and auditory data stream establishes the magma arena as a terminal threat environment. Moving to the final championship sequence block, the thermal load reaches a peak state. The arena's defensive parameters are expanded, with higher flame burst outputs from the rim hardware during dunk events. This increase in photon load creates a high contrast ratio that can lead to temporary optical failure for the players. The forensic audit of Jett Fillmore's biological fallout during this sequence block indicates that the high-temperature environment contributed to the structural failure of her limb hardware. The friction coefficient of the court is further reduced by the presence of volcanic ash, creating a state of high-friction volatility. This environment is the ultimate diagnostic of the Thorns' unit cohesion, as they must navigate the physical hazards while main attraction executes his aggressive collision logic. The magma arena is not merely a setting, but a high-functioning piece of tactical hardware designed to break the internal programming of any biological asset that enters its perimeter. Spatial transitions to the Shadows match reveal the duo's role in managing the viewer's neural pattern during complex tactical sequences. The musk ox and fruit bat occupy a high-altitude node above the court, providing them with a clear optical axis of the tactical geometry. They utilize a mix of short, data-heavy clinical observations regarding the Shadow's gorilla mass and long, erratic explanations of Jett Fillmore's declining unit cohesion. This vocal blueprint maintains the viewer's engagement during periods of lower kinetic energy. The contrast ratio between Chuck's authoritative tone and Rusty's high-decibel outbursts creates a rhythmic logic that matches the hip-hop vibe of the film's overall aesthetic. This behavioral stimulus ensures that the audience remains in a state of high-frequency focus, even when the court action involves complex defensive screens and friction-based drills. Moving to the playoff diagnostic, the commentary units must handle a high cognitive load regarding the team's internal fracture. As Flo Everson initiates the secret pipeline for team liquidation, Chuck and Rusty monitor the resulting decline in the Thorns' performance metrics. Their verbal audit of Jett Fillmore's ball-hogging behavior provides a forensic record of the unit's failure. They react to the synaptic friction on the court with a sense of technical confusion, questioning the logic of the Thorns' roster state. This commentary serves to emphasize the high-stakes nature of the betrayal subplot, acting as the voice of the Vineland community's collective disappointment. The duo's inability to explain the roster's behavior further highlights the deep-seated terminal error in Flo's leadership blueprint. The final mission parameters during the championship match require the commentary nodes to reach their maximum velocity peak. As Jett Fillmore returns with crutch hardware, the duo's vocal output becomes a high-frequency behavioral stimulus for the entire stadium. They provide a real-time diagnostic of the match's shifting wind state, tracking the kinetic vectors of Will Harris as he navigates the magma's defensive grid. The Musk Ox asset utilizes his authoritative vocal hardware to validate Jett's final pass, while the Fruit Bat asset's reaction time to the winning dunk marks the moment of total mission success. Their joint acoustic signature during the celebration provides a final, high-fidelity audit of the team's triumph. The terminal verdict of this behavioral stimulus audit confirms that the commentary duo is the primary hardware for narrative delivery, bridging the gap between the sports simulation and the emotional core of the biological assets. The acoustic pipeline of this system state was engineered within the high-performance soundstage architecture of SONY Pictures. Biological asset Chris Bowers received the mission parameters to calibrate an acoustic interface that correlates with the high-frequency displacement seen on the screen. The score utilizes a unique spectral range, blending traditional orchestral load with modern percussive syncing to match the 2D-3D hybrid rendering cycle. This dual-logic architecture provides a sonic equivalent to the graffiti geometry aesthetic found in Vineland, mapping the acoustic blueprint during Will's urban transit data point. The score executes a heavy rhythmic bass with high-frequency electronic signal processing. This sound state functions as a behavioral stimulus, establishing the sinking city as a territory of constant torque and urban friction. The acoustic signature of the urban grid is layer-heavy, with every drumbeat hard-locked to the physical displacement of the biological assets as they navigate the concrete geometry. Moving to the training grid sequence block, the acoustic pipeline shifts to a clinical, goal-oriented logic. The score utilizes a lower volume metric during tactical data points, allowing for the clear transmission of the cast's linguistic hardware. As the propulsive impulse of the roster drills increases, the music undergoes a vector shift toward a higher frequency tempo. The use of percussive syncing ensures that every ball collision against the hardwood generates a corresponding audio spike in the spectral range. This forensic attention to audio-visual cohesion reduces the cognitive load on the audience, making the complex roarball maneuvers feel more intuitive. The acoustic pipeline audits the friction of the court hardware, creating a sound state that emphasizes the physical reality of the animated biological assets. This integration of score and sound effects is a primary component of the project's high-fidelity system state. The Lava Coast Magma Arena requires a total system recalibration of the acoustic hardware. The sound engineering team utilized a low-frequency rumble profile to simulate the thermal load of the volcanic vents. This background acoustic signature creates a state of persistent tension, functioning as a sensory stimulus that warns of the arena's high-hazard potential. During main attractions dunk sequences, the audio pipeline utilizes impact distortion to emphasize the horse's mass displacement. The acoustic signature of Maine's hooves hitting the basalt floor is rendered with a high-decibel shockwave effect, simulating a high-inertia kinetic event. This use of sound design to enhance character physics is a key data point in the technical success of the project. The contrast ratio between the Thorn's agile acoustic profile and the Magma's heavy industrial sound logic provides a clear audit of the narrative conflict. The final diagnostic of the betrayal occurs during the championship sequence block. As the win state logic shifts toward the Thorns, Flow's financial pipeline begins to experience a terminal failure. The roster's decision to continue play under a new ownership blueprint, initiated by Modo the Komodo Dragon, represents the ultimate vector shift against her administrative dominance. Flow's reaction time to the card game reveal shows a catastrophic breakdown of her internal programming. She transitions from a state of high authority to a state of total status loss within seconds. The physical displacement of Flow from the arena, chased by Archie's twin daughters, serves as a non-verbal forensic summary of her defeat. The profit logic that drove her betrayal resulted in a total system state collapse for her character. Spatial transition to the Vineland celebration concludes the audit of the systematic betrayal. The biological assets of the Thorns have successfully purged the predatory leadership hardware from their organization. The forensic audit confirms that Flo Everson's administrative logic was a flawed blueprint, failing to account for the torque of team unit loyalty and the kinetic inertia of collective effort. The terminal verdict of this diagnostic identifies the betrayal as the primary friction point that forced the biological assets to recalibrate their own internal programming for the final win state. By neutralizing Flo's profit-oriented logic, the team secured a more stable infrastructure for the future of Roarball in Vineland. The mission parameters for a fair and cohesive league have been successfully reset. The narrative resolution of the Vineland Thorns ownership conflict is engineered through a chance-based tactical maneuver identified as the card game logic. Moving to the post-game sequence block, the biological asset Modo Alashenko initiates a disclosure protocol regarding the team's administrative infrastructure. While the primary mission parameter was focused on Roarball point acquisition, Modo was simultaneously executing a secondary pipeline focused on legal asset retrieval. The forensic deconstruction of this plot node reveals that Modo utilized a high-stakes card game interface with Florence Flo Everson to initiate a vector shift in team ownership. This resolution utilizes a chance metric to neutralize Flo's profit-oriented logic, providing a definitive termination of her predatory administration. The internal programming of the roster units shifts from uncertainty to a permanent win state, as the ownership hardware is now controlled by a trusted biological asset within the team unit. Analyzing the tactical geometry of the locker room during this disclosure, the cognitive load on the other biological assets is visible through their rapid synaptic response. Will Harris, Jett Fillmore, and Archie Everhardt process the data point that their contracts are no longer in a state of terminal decline. Modo displays the winning card hardware, a visual validator of the successful mission parameter. This narrative hardware choice provides a clean, high-fidelity resolution that avoids a complex legal diagnostic, opting instead for a symbolic victory state that matches the film's overall high-energy aesthetic. The card game logic functions as a final behavioral stimulus, reinforcing the theme that the underground street logic of Vineland can successfully disrupt the cold, clinical calculations of the corporate command deck. This resolution completes the team's transition from a collection of isolated units to a self-governed biological system. The displacement of Flo Everson from the organizational blueprint is finalized through this logic. As the Warthog asset realizes her financial pipeline has been severed, her internal programming reaches a state of catastrophic failure. The forensic audit of the roster's reaction time shows a collective shift toward total mission success. The card game node acts as the structural anchor point for the entire third act resolution, ensuring that the biological assets maintain control of their own athletic legacy. This narrative blueprint confirms that the Vineland Thorns are no longer hardware units for external profit, but a cohesive organization with integrated asset value. The terminal verdict of this audit identifies the card game as a high-value resolution tool that successfully aligns the team's physical victory with their structural independence. Spatial transition to the trophy celebration provides the final data point for the card game diagnostic. The Claw Championship trophy is held by the team while Modo monitors the celebration from a state of satisfied clinical observation. The ownership hardware is now synced to the player's goals, resulting in a stable system state for the future of the league. This resolution logic provides a final stimulus for the audience, confirming that the mission parameters for both the game and the organizational conflict have been reached. The narrative loop closes with a high-fidelity win, leaving the Thorns in a state of permanent structural balance. Every biological asset is now secured in a high-value node, waiting for the next cycle of the Roarball diagnostic. The forensic audit of the antagonist logic, specifically the main attraction diagnostic, reveals a high-mass displacement roll designed solely to test the Thorn's structural integrity. Main's predatory programming provides a constant friction coefficient that prevents the team unit from reaching a resting state. The verdict on this antagonistic hardware is that it serves its mission parameter efficiently, creating a high-stakes environment where biological fallout is a persistent threat. The final combustion of Main's hair hardware acts as a symbolic diagnostic of his total system state collapse, providing a definitive termination to his status dominance. This structural choice reinforces the film's hip-hop aesthetic, where status is won on the court and lost through public mockery. The final structural verdict confirms that the project achieved its goal of providing a high-energy, stylistically superior sports comedy diagnostic, while the narrative blueprint did not provide a revolutionary shift in storytelling logic. The calibration of the 2D/3D rendering pipeline and the vocal cast hardware provided a high-fidelity experience that justified the studio's capital investment. The film successfully navigated the transition from a low-status bedroom dream to a high-status arena victory, completing the mission parameters of the genre. As the credits initiate, the forensic record shows a project that prioritized technical finesse and atmospheric load over complex narrative geometry. This diagnostic concludes that the Vineland Thorns achieved a win state that was both stylistically vibrant and structurally sound. Comparative diagnostics with K-pop Demon Hunters reveal a shift toward a more aggressive, hip-hop-influenced aesthetic logic. While the previous project utilized a high-frequency pop luminance, this project prioritizes a lower Kelvin scale and a higher atmospheric load. The forensic audit of the character physics shows a more grounded mass displacement for the heavier biological assets like Archie Everhardt. The engineering team successfully calibrated the software to simulate the torque and momentum of rhinoceros and horse anatomy, a mission parameter that requires a higher level of physical simulation than human-like assets. This technical growth ensures that the high-velocity Roarball matches feel weighted and physically realistic, despite the exaggerated ballistic trajectory of the ball. The terminal verdict of the pipeline growth audit confirms that SONY Pictures Imageworks has reached a new status peak in animated technology. The project successfully integrated complex character anatomy, high thermal environments, and variable frame rate action into a stable, high-fidelity system state. This technical evolution ensures that the studio remains at the apex of the industry's creative and engineering hierarchy. As the final celebratory frames display the win state, the luminance of the screen serves as a forensic validator of the pipeline's success. The animation system engineered for this project is a high-performance blueprint that will likely serve as the hardware for future sports diagnostics within the studio's database. The mission to push the boundaries of visual language has been successfully completed. The terminal state of this forensic documentary audit identifies the final win state for the project and its biological assets. Analyzing the complete system state, the mission parameters for Will Harris have been reached with a 100% success rate. Will transitions from a low status, financially bankrupt unit to a high status, championship-winning asset. The forensic deconstruction of his behavioral stimulus throughout the timeline reveals a core of unyielding internal programming that resisted every environmental friction point. His ability to recalibrate the logic of Rohrball through street-level kinetic vectors has resulted in a total shift in the league's hierarchy. Will Harris is no longer a teenage American pygmy goat in a diner. He is a biological asset that has achieved permanent GOAT status within the Vineland infrastructure. Jett Fillmore's terminal state is a diagnostic of successful psychological recalibration. By purging her isolated idle logic and accepting a team unit node, she secured her legacy against the threat of obsolescence. The final victory state marks the moment her internal programming reached its peak performance. The mission parameters for the Vineland Thorns roster were achieved through unit cohesion and the neutralization of the predatory flow-aversion profit logic. The roster logic is now stable, with ownership hardware secured and a championship metric recorded in the league's history. This final diagnostic confirms that the high-stakes narrative loop reached a definitive and satisfying conclusion for every biological asset involved, resulting in a permanent win state for the territory of Vineland. The technical and aesthetic mission parameters of the project were also achieved with a high-fidelity verdict. The joint venture between the studios and the SONY Pictures Imageworks pipeline created a cinematic system that resonates as a stylistically superior sports fable. The forensic audit of the box office metrics, critical reception, and animation hardware confirms that the project achieved a high-value status in the 2026 market. Every data point, from the Kelvin scale calibration to the anatomical wardrobe architecture, served as a structural support for the final win state. The project stands as a successful diagnostic of how technical innovation can enliven a familiar narrative blueprint, providing a high-frequency experience for the biological audience. The mission to create a unique visual identity for the GOAT franchise has been reached. This concludes the forensic field report for GOAT. Every quadrant of the cinematic infrastructure has been audited, every kinetic vector has been tracked, and every biological asset has been diagnosed. The final summary confirms a successful execution of the narrative hardware and the animation pipeline. The Rohrball Arena stands as a territory of triumph, and the winning legacy of the Thorns is now a permanent data point in the Vineland database. The system state is complete, the diagnostic is terminal. This is the end of the report. Mission success confirmed, terminal status, GOAT.